I know it sounds crazy, but we're almost a quarter of the way through the fantasy regular season. Now, who out there at this point of the season expected Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, Zach Charbonnet, J.K. Dobbins, Juwan Jennings, Alec Pierce, Brenton Strange, and Isaiah Likely to be inside the top 10 at their position? Exactly. No one did. But it can't last. The cream always rises to the top, so let's dive into some Week 4 rankings. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone is doing well out there today. We're going to be talking about some Week 4 rankings here for fantasy football. Now, before we get into the first position, I thought it would be fun if I threw up a ticket here that I'm playing on Underdog this week. Now, you can choose to fade me or follow me. Whichever one you choose, it's still going to be some added fun. Now, if you don't already have an account on Underdog, now is the time to do so. So head over to Underdog or download the app, create a new account using the referral code Headliners when you do so. Once you make your minimum $10 deposit, you're going to get a couple things. First thing being a first-time deposit bonus of up to $1,000 in bonus cash, plus a free play. Like this week's free play, Patrick Mahomes. All he needs is 1 yard to hit. And I actually included that pick on my ticket here today. I got the Patrick Mahomes gimme. I'm going with a Saquon Barkley rusher receiving touchdown, a Breece Hall rusher receiving touchdown. How about Aaron Jones in a revenge game with a rush or receiving touchdown? And then I also went CJ Stroud higher than 1.5 passing touchdowns. Gimme 2 TDs this week, CJ. I figured this would give us a little bit of an added bonus to this week. Let's just see how we do. But all right, let's go ahead and dive into the first position. Let's talk quarterbacks first. But just like we always do, let's dive into a few of my hits and misses from last week. First, at the quarterback position, Jaden Daniels, somebody I had ranked super high. Same with Joe Burrow. Not just because T. Higgins was returning. You knew they were going to be throwing the ball a lot against Washington. Did I care if they were going to lose or not? No. I knew the points were going to be there, had Joe Burrow super high, and then I've really dropped Trevor Lawrence in the rankings here as of late. A lot of people questioned that last week, but we kind of saw something is wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He is broken. A few of my biggest misses, I wasn't expecting Malik Willis to go out there and look like a capable NFL quarterback. Andy Dalton comes back. He really leads the Carolina offense, puts a lot of points up on the board. And then Aaron Rodgers. Old Yeller himself making an appearance here in Week 3, finishing inside the top 12. I did not have him ranked high enough last week. But now let's dive into the actual rankings here for Week 4. Just a reminder, this is meant to be a quick run through. If you need more detailed information, those are in the start-sit videos, so be sure to check those out. And let's just go ahead and bring up the guys right here in Tier 1. It's Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar Jackson. Now for Josh Allen, this doesn't really surprise anyone. Yes, it's not the easiest of matchups going up against Baltimore, but Josh Allen just threw for 4 tutties and only played 3 quarters last week. Then we get Kyler Murray in a great matchup going up against Washington. No team in the NFL allows more fantasy points to quarterbacks than the Washington Commandos. I got Kyler Murray pretty high this week because of it. Then we go down to Joe Burrow in a great matchup going up against Carolina. And at this point, I don't even know if the Cincinnati defense can stop Carolina, so Burrow is going to have to keep throwing once again this week. Then we go down to Jaden Daniels. He's starting to get a little bit comfy in that passing game, and now a great matchup going up against Arizona. Could we see a shootout in the desert? I kind of think we do, and that's why both of these guys are this high. Which then leads us down to Jalen Hurts. No, I'm not a Jalen Hurts hater. No, it's not the matchup going up against Tampa Bay. It's the fact that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are more than likely both going to be out for this ball game, and that limits his upside. Then we go down to Lamar Jackson in a matchup going up against Buffalo. Now, we've seen Buffalo absolutely dominate the last couple weeks. Do we see Lamar Jackson use his legs a little bit more this week to really extend drives and try to keep the ball away from the Buffalo Bills? I got him right here at the bottom of Tier 1. Which then leads us down to Tier 2, where I have Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and Jared Goff. For Patrick Mahomes, we know Derwin James is suspended. Maybe we see a little bit more Travis Kelce this week against the Chargers. And then after Mahomes, this is where I got CJ Stroud, the guy who I need 2 tutties from in Week 4, now going up against Jacksonville. And like I mentioned, Josh Allen threw for 263 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions, and didn't even play the 4th quarter against Jacksonville last week. Then we got Dak Prescott going up against the New York Giants. He has blown the doors off of the New York Giants both times they played last year. In their last meeting, he threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, and now the Giants secondary is banged up. I think Dak Prescott's going to be throwing all game long. Which then brings us down to Sam Darnold in a matchup going up against the Green Bay Packers. He's got 8 touchdowns in 3 games. He's playing great football. Yes, Justin Jefferson is going to have to deal with Jair Alexander, but with the way that the Vikings are playing, can we really count out Sam Darnold at this point? which will then bring us down to Baker Mayfield in a matchup going up against Philly. You have to believe that in this matchup, he's going to be looking for Mike Evans deep down the field at least 1 or 2 times. We know Rachaad White has been a disappointment in the running game, but with Chris Godwin absolutely eating in the slot, I got Baker right here near the bottom of tier 2. Then we got Jared Goff to round out tier 2 in a matchup going up against Seattle. He's back at home where typically he plays a little bit better. Really hoping this entire Lions offense starts to play a little bit better, nowhere near where they've been the last couple of years, right? So let's go ahead and now bring up tier 3, where I have Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, Jordan Love, Derek Carr, Caleb Williams, and Anthony Richardson. Now, everyone knows I love Brock do 'em dirty Purdy, and we know that Juwan Jennings went off. We didn't really see a whole lot of Brandon Ayuk last week. It's a difficult matchup going up against New England, but with Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey still banged up, I got him right here at the top of tier 3, and hopefully he overperforms this, but there are just so many things going against him this week. Then we got Geno Smith in a matchup going up against Detroit. Way easier to throw on Detroit than it is to run on them. I expect Geno to sling it all 4 quarters. Then this is where I have Jordan Love. Now he's expected to return. Nothing is official as of yet, but in a matchup going up against Minnesota, Jordan Love has already showed that he can have a safe floor against almost any team in the NFL. Really waiting to see if he's going to suit up for sure. Got him right here mid-tier 3. Then we have Derek Carr in a matchup going up against Atlanta. No, a big part of the success of Derek Carr are those dump offs to Alvin Kamara. He's a little bit banged up right now, but he should be good to go. Then we got Caleb Williams in a great matchup going up against the Rams, a defense in which he's going to have to throw the ball against. Does he throw it 50 plus times again? Honestly, maybe. And when he's got big play guys like DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, the opportunities are there for those multi-touchdown games, and that's why I have him here in tier 3 as well. And then Anthony Richardson, who has fallen dramatically, and honestly, I was contemplating not even putting him in tier 3. It's a difficult matchup going up against Pittsburgh. The dude's thrown way more interceptions than he has touchdowns, and they're really not throwing a lot in this offense to begin with. Now, in case you're wondering, I have Justin Fields just underneath him, but honestly, Fields may have the slightly safer floor if you just don't want to gamble with Anthony Richardson anymore. So that'll do it for quarterbacks. Let's transition over to running backs now. A few of my hits from last week. How about David Montgomery? I had him super high in my rankings. Dude is just reliable AF. You know what you're going to get from him each and every week. James Conner was a hit for me. How was he a hit? He had a bad game. It's because I ranked him crazy low last week, just like I did with Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I've dropped them so far down in my rankings that a lot of people thought I was absolutely nuts. Now, are they going to stay that low this week? We'll find out in just a second. Some of my bigger misses, Chuba Hubbard. I don't think I was expecting that much of a turnaround in Carolina for sure. I didn't even have Chuba anywhere near close to my top 30. How about Jordan Mason? Everybody has high expectations weekly. I did last week and it didn't produce. And then Kyren Williams. I had him just inside the top 20. Was not expecting him to go totally ham in week 3. So even though everyone was starting him, I didn't have him anywhere near high enough in my rankings. But now let's take a look at the week 4 rankings. And right here at the top, we got Saquon Barkley, of course. In a matchup going up against Tampa Bay, they allow the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, and we need Saquon to find the end zone this week. Then we got Breece Hall in a matchup going up against Denver. It's going to be hard to get the ball on the outside to Garrett Wilson with Patrick Surtain all over him. Not only do we need Breece Hall to have a big game, we need him to find the end zone as well. Which then brings us down to Bijan Robinson in a great matchup going up against New Orleans. This one right here is all about volume. Then we go to Jahmyr Gibbs in a matchup going up against Seattle. I really expect this game to be pretty close. And in close games, we have bigger opportunities for Jahmyr Gibbs to get that big play in the passing game. That's why I got him at number 4. Then we got Derrick Henry. The king is back. Now he's got a matchup going up against Buffalo. He's going to eat once again if this game can stay close. Then James Conner in a great matchup going up against Washington and ranked much higher than last week. Washington allows over 20 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, so James Conner's inside the top 10. Then we got Alvin Kamara going up against the Falcons. Now, yes, like I mentioned earlier, has been limited in practice, but I do expect him to play this week, and Kamara has already proven for the last 3 weeks that he's going to be a huge chunk of this New Orleans offense and relied upon not only in the running game, but the passing game as well. Then we got Jordan Mason to round out tier 1 in a matchup going up against New England. Now, with San Francisco still dealing with so many injuries, you have to expect that Jordan Mason is going to be flirting with 18 plus touches once again, and that's why he's here at the bottom of tier 1. which will then lead us down to tier 2, where we have Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, Devon Achane, Aaron Jones, James Cook, Brian Robinson, Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery, and Travis Etienne. For Jonathan Taylor, he's really the best part of the Indianapolis offense right now, but it's a very difficult matchup going up against Pittsburgh. Then we got Kyron Williams going up against Chicago, and he's really being saved by touchdowns so far this season, but honestly, he continues to get those touchdown chances weekly. That's why he's still right here at number 10. 11, Devon Achane going up against Tennessee. Really going to need him to excel in that pass-catching game here this week to have the higher ceiling. We do not know yet if we're going to have Skylar Thompson or Tyler Huntley at the time of this recording. Either way, though, they're going to have to utilize Achane in the passing game. Got him right here in tier 2. Then we got Aaron Jones in that revenge game going up against Green Bay, and we know it's easier to run on Green Bay than it is to throw on them. Then we have James Cook going up against Baltimore. This may be his toughest matchup of the year. Baltimore allows the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, but the big plays have been there weekly thus far for James Cook. Then we go down to Brian Robinson. Not only a great matchup going up against Arizona, but Austin Eckler has already been ruled out, so you better believe we're going to see a whole lot of B-Rob. Then we go down to Josh Jacobs in a matchup going up against Minnesota. Is Jordan Love back? Because if he is, that really helps open up the running game, because Jordan Love can actually push the ball down the field consistently. Then we got David Montgomery going up against Seattle. Dude just scores touchdowns every single week, it seems like. Then we have Travis Etienne going up against Houston. He's playing just fine. He just needs Jacksonville to keep games a lot closer so he can be a part of the game script. But that will get us through tier 2, so now let's go down to tier 3, where we got Tony Pollard, Najee Harris, Jerome Ford, Zach Moss, Chuba Hubbard, Ramondre Stevenson, Devin Singletary, and Zach Charbonnet. For Tony Pollard, he's going up against Miami. Miami allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, but he's coming off an absolute stinker in which he should have dominated in week 3. Then we have Najee Harris going up against Indianapolis. We know Jaylen Warren is banged up, and Indy allows over 19 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Najee in line for a solid week. Then we have Jerome Ford, banged up as well, missing some practice, but a great matchup going up against Las Vegas, who allows the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Then we have Zach Moss, had a great week 3, now gets the Carolina Panthers. Now, he's not playing bad, but I could see Cincinnati relying a little bit more on the passing game this week. Then we have his opponent in that game, Chuba Hubbard. Now, his days may be numbered because Jonathan Brooks is nearing a return, but for right now, still in that RB2 territory. Then we have Ramondre Stevenson going up against San Francisco. This San Francisco defense just isn't what it used to be. They absolutely got torched by Kyron Williams last week, and they're going to have to run the ball a lot this week in New England to keep the ball away from San Francisco. Then we have Devin Singletary going up against Dallas. He's been a pleasant surprise for fantasy owners here the first 3 weeks of the season. Now, I expect Dallas to throw the ball a butt ton in this game. So if the Giants fall behind early, we may be in a little bit of trouble with Devin Singletary, and that's why I got him right here near the bottom of tier 3. Also where I have Zach Charbonnet, just a very difficult matchup going up against Detroit. There is no team that allows fewer points to running backs than the Detroit Lions, so Zach Charbonnet nowhere near as high as he has been the last couple weeks. Which will then take us down to tier 4, where we have J.K. Dobbins, Braylon Allen, Rashad White, DeAndre Swift, Zamir White, Bucky Irving, Carson Steele, and Rico Dowdle. Now for Dobbins, he's got a tough matchup going up against Kansas City, and we do not know the status of Justin Herbert as of yet, who re-aggravated that high ankle sprain. Add that on top of the fact of the matchup, that's why I got him down here in tier 4. Braylon Allen in a great matchup going up against Denver, and he continues to earn touches each and every week. Rashad White going up against Philadelphia. Obviously, Rashad White is not 100% healthy. He's been dealing with a groin issue, but now he also has to worry about the Philadelphia defense on top of that, and Bucky Irving. That's why he's been dropped down so low. DeAndre Swift, he's going up against the Los Angeles Rams. And he hasn't been able to get anything going all year long, but if the Chicago Bears want to find any success this year, they need to become more two-dimensional and rely a little bit more on DeAndre Swift, but he's all the way down here in tier 4. Next up is Zamir White. He's going up against the Cleveland Browns. Honestly, the running game in Las Vegas, not a whole lot to write home about there. Then we get Bucky Irving, who is climbing the rankings quickly in a matchup going up against Philadelphia. It's a tough matchup. If this was a better matchup, he may be up inside tier 3, honestly, because he looks great on the ground. Then we have Carson Steele going up against the Chargers. Not that bad of a matchup, but honestly, what happens in this backfield in Kansas City with Kareem Hunt likely to make his debut in week 4? Do we see a 50-50 split? How much is Samaje Perine still a part of the mix? There's a lot of questions there, a lot of unknown, and until we really see it play out on the field, there's no way to know for sure which running back is going to get the bulk of the touches. And then the last guy right here in tier 4, it's Rico Dowdle. In my opinion, the better running running back as of right now for the Dallas Cowboys going up against the Giants. Now, the Cowboys have handled business against the Giants the last few times they've played, and if that's the case again, we're going to see a lot of second half running. More than likely, that would be Rico Dowdle. Which will then bring us down to tier 5. It's Kareem Hunt, Chase Brown, Justice Hill, Javonte Williams, Kenneth Walker, and Joe Mixon. And we'll get to the guys at the bottom here in just a second. But for Kareem Hunt, like I just mentioned with Carson Steele, until we see how many touches this guy is going to get weekly, it's really hard to just catapult him up the rankings until we actually see him on a football field. Don't forget, he's been unemployed for quite a while. Then we have Chase Brown. If this dude got volume, he'd be putting up huge numbers. He looks a lot better on the ground than Zach Moss does. He's a lot quicker. He's a lot more explosive. He just doesn't see enough volume just yet. Then we have Justice Hill. With the way that Buffalo has been playing as of late, just blowing out opponents, you have to expect Baltimore to have to throw the ball maybe a little bit more this week, which is going to include Justice Hill more than usual. Then we got Javonte Williams going up against the Jets. The guy's been a disappointment this year, and in a difficult matchup, he's really touchdown dependent. And then lastly, I put in Kenneth Walker and Joe Mixon because I know a lot of people are going to be asking about them. They're currently dealing with injuries. Now, for Kenneth Walker, he could barely run at 50% last week without pain. I don't know if we see him this week, and if we do, it's against the top run defense in the league. And then Joe Mixon still not practicing at the time of this recording in a matchup going up against Jacksonville. With the way that Jacksonville has been playing here as of late, I don't think we see Houston rush Joe Mixon back. Now, if he does play, it's not the greatest of matchups going up against Jacksonville. They're easier to throw on than they are to run on. But these last two are definitely names we're paying attention to come end of the week. All right, so now we've gone through running backs. We're going to move on from guys who carry balls to guys who catch balls. And my bigger hits and misses from last week at the wide receiver position for hits, it was Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice, and Chris Olave. If Joe Burrow was going to have a big game, I expected Chase to be the one main beneficiary of it. That played out. How about Rashee Rice? I don't care that he's not getting deep balls down the field. Dude is racking up targets and receptions. And then Chris Olave, we said it here to start the season. Once the Saints were playing in closer games, we were going to see more and more Chris Olave, and that's exactly what we're seeing. But I also had a couple bad misses as well. Brandon Ayuk, I expected more in a game in which he was going to be heavily relied upon. The target share was there. Just the receptions and yardage weren't. Juwan Jennings went off. Amari Cooper. I'm almost okay missing on Amari Cooper because this offense in Cleveland is so hit or miss. It's so up and down. It's really a lottery ticket every time you throw him in your lineup. And then Deontay Johnson. We knew he was going to be a target hog, but what was the quality of those targets going to be from Andy Dalton? Now that we know they're going to be high quality targets and a bunch of them, he's definitely going to be somebody who climbs the rankings starting this week. So we'll go ahead and dive into wide receivers right here in tier 1. We got Jamar Chase, Marvin Harrison Jr., CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashee Rice, Justin Jefferson, and Nico Collins. Now, right at the top, we got Jamar Chase going up against the Carolina Panthers, and this team needs to turn it around, and Chase is their top big play guy in a good matchup. I put him at number 1. Then Marvin Harrison Jr. going up against Washington. The Commanders allow some of the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, and they're going to have a hard time stopping Marvin Harrison Jr. in those big chunk plays. Then we have CeeDee Lamb going up against the Giants. He's had at least 75 yards or a touchdown in every game against the Giants over the last 2 years. Then we go down to Amon-Ra St. Brown going up against Seattle. With Sam Laporta limited with an ankle sprain, we could see even more Amon-Ra St. Brown this week. Then we got Rashee Rice, like I said, racking up targets and receptions in a game against the Chargers. I really expect a whole lot of the same. After him, though, we go down to Justin Jefferson going up against the Packers. Not the greatest of matchups. He's going to draw Jair Alexander. But with the way that Jettas is playing and Sam Darnold, I really can't count this guy out each and every week. And then Nico Collins, he's still the alpha in this Houston offense in a matchup going up against Jacksonville, who just got torched through the air by Josh Allen. Nico could have a big day. Then we go down to tier 2 where I got DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin, Chris Olave, Malik Neighbors, Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore, Devontae Adams, and Garrett Wilson. For DK Metcalf, he's going up against Detroit. And you know they're going to have a hard time running the football in that game, so they're going to be throwing. Their big-time weapon is DK Metcalf. That's why he's this high. Then we have Chris Godwin going up against Philadelphia. He has just been eating in the slot, and there's no reason to think that he doesn't again this week. Then we go down to Chris Olave going up against Atlanta, and I expect Atlanta to keep this game close. When games are close, we see more Olave. That's why he's at 10. Then we go down to Malik Neighbors going up against the Dallas Cowboys, and this one right here is all about volume and red zone look. This guy is legit. Can Daniel Jones just keep it together week in and week out and feed him enough catchable targets? Then we go down to Mike Evans going up against Philadelphia. He's had a couple downer weeks here as of late, but no, he's not washed. They're going to look to get him involved this week going up against Philadelphia. Then we see Brandon Ayuk right here in the middle of tier 2 in a matchup going up against New England. A tough matchup with Christian Gonzalez, but this is the 4th game of the year for Brandon Ayuk. His quote-unquote preseason is now over since he really didn't get a whole lot of off-season work. We saw him get double-digit targets last week, and I expect the same this week. Then we have DJ Moore in a matchup going up against the Los Angeles Rams, a Rams defense that's shown that they can be had with those big plays through the air. Could we see DJ Moore get one of those big plays this week? Then we got Devontae Adams going up against Cleveland, a Cleveland defense that could not limit Malik Neighbors. I expect a whole lot of Devontae Adams. May not be a whole lot of yardage, but I could definitely see him rack up some receptions. Then we got Garrett Wilson going up against Denver. And honestly, I may have him too high still because he's going to be getting that Patrick Surtain treatment this week. I really left him this high though because after this point, there's a lot of risk with a lot of wide receivers. So let's dive in to tier 3 where I have Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed, Drake London, Deontay Johnson, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Jamison Williams, and Terry McLaurin. Now for Zay Flowers, I think it's a given at this point that he's going to lead this team in targets pretty much every game of the season. With the way that Buffalo is putting points on the board, they're going to be throwing in Baltimore, and that benefits Zay Flowers. Then we have Jaden Reed going up against Minnesota. And honestly, this one is really dependent on the health of Jordan Love. If he plays, this is where he stays. If Jordan Love does miss this week, Jaden Reed's probably going to fall down to tier 5. After him, though, we got Drake London going up against the New Orleans Saints, and really we're starting to see more and more Drake London weekly. Now, while it seems like Kirk Cousins loves himself the binky of Darnell Mooney, Drake London still getting the looks in the end zone. That's why he remains this high. Then we got Deontay Johnson. We know he's going to see all types of targets. He will be Andy Dalton's top target once again, going up against Andy Dalton's former team in the Cincinnati Bengals. Then we got Stephon Diggs going up against Jacksonville. And really at this point, there's no question. It's Nico Collins and it's Stephon Diggs. We really don't have to worry about Tank Dell hurting Stephon Diggs' value. Then we got Tyreek Hill. All the way down here towards the bottom of tier 3, that sucks. Do they make a switch to Tyler Huntley? Does that improve the ceiling of Tyreek Hill? More than likely, probably not enough. He's still inside my top 24, but barely. Then we have Jamison Williams going up against Seattle. Seattle's defense is fairly underrated, but with Detroit at home, we have a better chance for those big plays. We see them more consistently there. And then Terry McLaurin back up inside the top 24 at 24 in a great matchup going up against Arizona. He changed sides of the field and immediately went the hell off. And the question needs to be asked, has this offense turned the corner in Washington? Because if so, Terry McLaurin is going to continue to climb up these rankings weekly. But now we move down to tier 4. It's Khalil Shakir, Juwan Jennings, George Pickens, T. Higgins, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Roma Dunze, and Amari Cooper. Talk about a boom or bust tier right here. Y'all know I love Khalil Shakir. He's inside my top 25. It's a difficult matchup going up against Baltimore, but he is the number 1 wide receiver in Buffalo, whether you like it or not. The only reason he's not higher is, do we start to see a little bit more Keon Coleman, especially in the red zone as the season goes on? That could take away a little bit of the Shakir ceiling. Then we have Juwan Jennings, and I know a lot of people want to have him super high after what happened last week. But you also have to expect New Orleans to give him a little bit more defensive attention after what he did last week. With Brandon Ayuk also still there in the mix, I got Juwan Jennings right here at 26. Maybe he should be a little bit higher, but man, there's so much risk there. Then we got George Pickens going up against the Colts. The matchup is great, but are the targets going to be there and are they going to be catchable is the biggest question. Then we go down to T. Higgins going up against the Carolina Panthers. And I expect a little bit more from him now in his second game back. He looked somewhat slow last week. If you go back and watch the film, even his cuts weren't very crisp. It's like he was really worried to push it a little bit harder. Maybe that confidence grows here in his second game back. Then we have JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba going up against Detroit. Already talked about how Seattle's going to have to throw the ball in this game. Then we go down to Roma Dunze in a matchup going up against the Rams. A little bit more big play dependent. Saw a great target share just last week. But really it's all about the touchdowns, right? And if that touchdown swings the way of DJ Moore this week, we have a little bit of a lower ceiling for Roma Dunze. And then Amari Cooper, the ultimate boomer bust play going up against the Raiders. Is this a revenge game still? I really don't think we can call it a revenge game anymore. I mean, they're in a different city. In my mind, what matters more is which Deshaun Watson shows up. And then we go down to tier 5. It's Rashid Shaheed, Tank Dell, Calvin Ridley, Jalen Waddle, Brian Thomas Jr., and Michael Pittman Jr. And if we go to Rashid Shaheed, he's going up against Atlanta. We know he's big play dependent, but he's getting those big play looks every single week. He dropped a big time touchdown in week 3 that would have given him yet another huge week. It was almost 3 straight weeks of big time numbers for Rashid Shaheed. Then we got Tank Dell. I do like that he had more targets in week 3, and we do know that it's easier to pass on Jacksonville than run on them, but really until he sees a huge uptick in production, he's going to be pretty low in the rankings. Which then leads us to Calvin Ridley in a matchup going up against Miami. We're really starting to see a little bit more DeAndre Hopkins, which is limiting the ceiling of Calvin Ridley. That's why he's dropped down. Jalen Waddle going up against Jacksonville. Who plays quarterback? Is it Skylar Thompson? Is it Tyler Huntley? Either way, it's a huge risk for Jalen Waddle. Then we got Brian Thomas Jr. going up against Houston. If Jacksonville falls behind early, they're going to have to be throwing the football quite a bit. That's why Brian Thomas is still inside the top 36. And then lastly, Michael Pittman going up against Pittsburgh. Not an easy matchup whatsoever. And with the inconsistencies of Anthony Richardson, we have to start dropping Michael Pittman further and further down each and every week. Which then only leaves us tight ends, the football kind, of course. And when we talk about hits and misses from last week, it's almost a given that everyone's going to be a miss every week at this position. There were only like 4 tight ends in week 3 that scored double-digit fantasy points, which is not good at all. A few of my bigger hits, Dalton Kincaid. I told people not to give up on Dalton Kincaid. He found the end zone. Jake Ferguson, a great target share in his return. 2 guys we definitely have to start each and every week. Some of the bigger misses, Cole Kmet, but honestly, it was his first good game of the season. Same with Tyler Conklin. Dude had like 16 receiving yards coming into week 3. Nothing was saying to start Tyler Conklin. Had himself a great week. Is it something that continues? There's a chance for it here this week only because we see Patrick Surtain out there on Garrett Wilson, but honestly, probably not something we should rely upon rest of season. But let's go ahead and dive in to tier 1 here for the tight ends. And that's where we have Dallas Goedert, Trey McBride, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Kincaid, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers. Now for Dallas Goedert, he's going up against Tampa Bay. A great matchup, and everyone else is hurt in this offense. You have to think he sees at least 10 targets. Then we go down to Trey McBride in a great matchup going up against Washington. But is Trey McBride healthy? He's currently in the concussion protocol, so stay tuned. Let's see if he can clear it in time to play in this game. If he can, he's a great start. Then we get Jake Ferguson going up against the Giants. We've talked all show about how the Dallas Cowboys have stuck it to the New York Giants in the past, and with the target share that Jake Ferguson sees at this position, he needs to be in the top 5. Which then takes us down to Dalton Kincaid going up against Baltimore. We need a lot more close games in Buffalo so we can get a whole lot more Dalton Kincaid, but he's definitely somebody that deserves to be in the top 5. Then George Kittle in a matchup going up against New England. A matchup in which they really need George Kittle, but he's dealing with a hamstring injury, and it's still unclear whether or not he's going to return. Then we also have Brock Bowers. Tough matchup going up against Cleveland. They allow only 6 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, but how crazy is it that 6 fantasy points is enough to be a top 10 tight end weekly in fantasy football? Which then takes us down to tier 2. It's Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, Kyle Pitts, Sam Laporta, and Mark Andrews. For Travis Kelce in a matchup going up against the Chargers in which they do not have Derwin James. Does that help Travis Kelce? Is this a week that we can see vintage Travis Kelce? If it is, you may want to sell him after this week because it's not going to be something we see each and every week. Which will then take us down to Zach Ertz in a matchup going up against his former team, the Arizona Cardinals. With Jaden Daniels really turning the corner in the passing game last week, we're looking for him to continue it here this week against the Cardinals. That's why Zach Ertz is this high. Then we got Kyle Pitts going up against the New Orleans Saints. And really where we were hoping to see more Kyle Pitts in the red zone, it's just not happening. That's why he's not any higher. Then we got Sam Laporta going up against Seattle. He's dealing with a low ankle sprain. Another one of these players we need to pay attention to on whether or not he's going to even be available for this game. But even if he is available, he's not even hardly putting up top 10 numbers anyway. That's why he's down this low. With Mark Andrews going up against Buffalo, at this point, it's a crapshoot for all tight ends. Let's just hope that Lamar Jackson can remember that Mark Andrews plays on his team at this point and throw him at the bottom of tier 2. Which then leaves us tier 3. It's Patty F, Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, Tyler Conklin, Mike Gesicki, and Isaiah Likely. For Pat Freiermuth, he's going up against the Indianapolis Colts. A great matchup. We're really just not seeing a whole lot of big-time looks for Pat Freiermuth. He's getting a few receptions here or there, but really nothing much down the field. Then we have Jonnu Smith going up against Tennessee. Now, if Miami goes to Tyler Huntley, he absolutely force-fed the ball to Mark Andrews when he was in Baltimore. Did he really like Mark Andrews, or is it a tight end thing? Because if it's a tight end thing, Jonnu Smith would be the main beneficiary of it. Which then takes us to Tyler Conklin, like we mentioned a little bit earlier. A decent matchup going up against Denver, and with Patrick Surtain on Garrett Wilson, maybe we see a little bit more Tyler Conklin this week than Mike Gesicki going up against Carolina. Would love to have him higher, but now all of a sudden rookie tight end Eric All is starting to take away a few targets weekly. That's really going to limit the ceiling of Mike Gesicki, and that's why he's dropped down. And then Isaiah Likely in that matchup going up against Buffalo. I'm really counting on the fact that Buffalo gets an early lead. Baltimore has to continue to throw, and maybe we see some added targets going the way of Isaiah Likely. So there you have your week 4 rankings for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Now, like I say in every single ranking show, maybe you don't agree with where I have some players ranked, and that's fine. You gotta remember, our rankings aren't supposed to match. If they did, it would be absolutely pointless to even watch the shows. The entire purpose of watching others' rankings is to gain perspective on all the different players. Because once we come together as a community and build rankings together, that's how we find so much success. Now, if that right there gets your juices flowing, do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, if you're looking for more additional rankings, kicker rankings, defense rankings, flex rankings, those are a member perk, so be sure to hit the join button right below the video. You'll not only get those extra rankings, but you're going to get members-only live streams and access to Discord as well. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day now. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.
Analytics, off the chain, all the channels, not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headline